What happens when a forgotten veteran's kindness sparks a revolution in a sleepy coastal town? Stay tuned for a story of betrayal, quiet courage, and a widow's hidden legacy that'll leave you speechless. Hit that like, smash the subscribe, and ring the bell. These are the stories that give you chills. The salty breeze swept through Port Haven, a small coastal town where the ocean's hum was louder than the chatter of its few thousand souls. At 60, Sam adjusted his faded navy jacket, the cuffs frayed from years of wear. His grey hair caught the morning mist as he walked the cracked sidewalks, toolbox swinging in his calloused hand. A former Navy mechanic, he'd served 2 decades fixing engines in war zones, only to return to a world that seemed to forget him. His wife, Clara, had passed 5 years ago, leaving a void no amount of work could fill. Yet Sam's eyes, though tired, held a spark, hope forged in the fires of loss and duty. Each morning, he rose at dawn, brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and set out to mend what he could. Leaky faucets, creaky gates, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind from wandering to darker places. Port Haven's clapboard houses leaned into the wind, their paint peeling like memories. The scent of seaweed and fresh bread from the corner bakery mingled in the air. Sam nodded to familiar faces, old fishermen, shopkeepers, but kept to himself. He wasn't one for small talk. Not since the VA sent him a letter denying his claim for hearing loss from years around roaring engines. Systems broken, he'd mutter, but he never stopped showing up. His routine was simple. Fix, listen, move on. Today, though, something felt different. The overcast sky hung low, pressing on his shoulders as he turned onto Willow Street. A rusty mailbox caught his eye, tilting precariously outside a weathered cottage. Its hinges groaned in the wind, a small rebellion against neglect. Sam slowed, his boots scuffing the pavement. He didn't know who lived there, but he knew neglect when he saw it. Setting his toolbox down, he knelt, the cold metal biting his fingers as he inspected the damage. "Needs a new screw?" he said to no one, his voice gravelly but warm. That's when he heard it, a soft shuffle behind him. An elderly woman, maybe 80, stood at the cottage gate, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun. Her beige cardigan was buttoned to the top, though the spring air was mild. In her trembling hands, she clutched a faded photograph, its edges worn soft. Her eyes, pale blue and sharp, studied Sam with a mix of caution and curiosity. "You don't have to do that," she said, her voice soft but steady, carrying a faint southern lilt. Sam glanced up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "No trouble, ma'am. Just needs a quick fix." He offered a small smile, the kind that said he wasn't here to pry. She hesitated, then stepped closer, her orthopedic shoes scuffing the path. "Folks don't usually stop to help," she said, her gaze flickering to the mailbox. "Most just walk on by." Sam shrugged, already digging in his toolbox for a screw. "Some things are worth stopping for." The woman's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. She tucked the photograph into her cardigan pocket, her movements deliberate. Sam noticed the way her fingers lingered, as if the photo held a world of weight. He didn't ask. He'd learned long ago that stories come when they're ready. The screwdriver clicked against the metal, a rhythmic sound blending with the distant waves. The woman watched in silence, her presence steady, like she was used to waiting. When Sam tightened the final screw, the mailbox stood straight, no longer swaying in the breeze. "There," he said, standing and brushing dirt from his knees. "Should hold now." Her eyes softened, a flicker of gratitude breaking through her guarded expression. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'd been meaning to get that fixed for months." Sam nodded, packing his tools. "Happy to help." He tipped his cap, ready to move on, but her voice stopped him. "I'm Ellen," she said, extending a hand, her grip surprisingly firm for someone so frail. Sam shook it, his rough palm meeting her age-spotted skin. "Sam," he replied. "Live just up the road." Ellen's gaze lingered, like she was measuring him. "My husband used to fix things too," she said, her voice quieter now. "Always said a man's worth is in what he leaves better than he found it." Sam's chest tightened. He thought of Clara. How she'd say something similar when he'd come home from a long deployment. "Sounds like a good man," he said, keeping his tone even. Ellen nodded, her eyes drifting to the sea. He was. The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken stories. Sam sensed she wasn't ready to share more, and he respected that. He hoisted his toolbox, ready to leave, but Ellen's voice came again, softer this time. "Would you maybe check the gate next week? It's been sticking." Sam met her gaze, seeing something deeper than a simple request. a need to be seen, to matter. "Be here Monday," he promised. As he walked away, the fog thickened, wrapping Port Haven in a quiet shroud. Ellen stood by her gate, watching him go, the photograph back in her hand. Sam didn't know it yet, but that small act, fixing a mailbox for a stranger, had set something in motion. Something that would shake this sleepy town to its core. By noon, word of Sam's deed had trickled through Port Haven's gossip mill. Mrs. Delaney, the baker, mentioned it to her customers, her flour-dusted hands waving as she spoke. "Sam's out there fixing Ellen's mailbox, no charge. Man's got a heart, I'll say that." At the diner, old fisherman sipped coffee and nodded approval. "Always been a good one, that Sam," said Joe, his voice rough from years at sea. But not everyone was impressed. At the hardware store, Carl, a wiry man in his 40s, scoffed as he rang up a customer. "Sam's playing saint again, huh? Bet he's just fishing for attention." The customer, a young mother, frowned but said nothing, hurrying out with her bag of nails. Sam heard the whispers as he passed the post office later that day. Two women, their voices low, glanced his way. "He's got no family, no real job. Why's he poking around Ellen's place?" Sam kept walking, his jaw tight. He'd felt this before. The sting of judgment from folks who didn't understand. In the Navy, he'd been part of a team, trusted to keep ships running under fire. Here, in civilian life, he was just a guy with a toolbox, easy to dismiss. But Ellen's grateful eyes stayed with him, a reminder of why he kept going. That evening, he sat on his porch, the creak of his rocking chair blending with the waves. His small house, paint chipped and roof sagging, was all he could afford on his pension. The VA's rejection letter lay on the kitchen table inside, a bitter reminder of a system that had turned its back. Yet Sam didn't feel alone tonight. He thought of Ellen, her photograph, her quiet strength. Something about her felt familiar, like she carried the same weight he did. The weight of a life shaped by service and loss. He didn't know her story, but he didn't need to. She'd asked for his help, and that was enough. Monday came, and Sam was back at Ellen's cottage, toolbox in hand. The gate squeaked as he tested it, the hinges caked with rust. Ellen appeared at the door, a mug of tea steaming in her hands. "Thought you might like this," she said, offering it. Sam took it, the warmth seeping into his palms. "Much obliged," he said, sipping the strong brew. They worked in companionable silence, Sam sanding the rust, while Ellen sat on a porch chair, her cardigan draped over her shoulders. The air smelled of salt and pine, the morning fog lifting to reveal a pale sun. Every so often, Ellen would share a small piece of herself. "My husband was Navy too," she said, her voice soft. "Served in Vietnam, never talked much about it." Sam nodded, his hand steady on the gate. "Some things don't need words." Ellen's eyes crinkled, a hint of a smile. "You're a listener, aren't you?" "Try to be," Sam said, meeting her gaze. He saw the photograph again, tucked in her pocket, but he didn't ask. Instead, he focused on the gate, smoothing the wood until it swung freely. When he finished, Ellen clapped her hands, a spark of joy in her eyes. "Better than new," she said. Sam packed his tools, but Ellen stopped him. "Would you sit a spell?" she asked, gesturing to the porch. He hesitated, then nodded, settling into a wicker chair. They sat, watching the sea, the silence comfortable. Ellen's hands rested in her lap, the photograph still hidden. Sam sensed it held a story. A husband, a war, a loss. But he let it be. Trust, he knew, was earned in quiet moments like these. The days slipped by in Port Haven, and Sam's visits to Ellen's cottage became a quiet routine. Each Monday, he'd arrive with his toolbox, tackling small repairs, a loose porch board, a flickering lamp. Ellen would greet him with tea or a plate of oatmeal cookies, her silver hair catching the morning light. The salty air mixed with the scent of baked goods, and the creak of her porch swing became a familiar rhythm. Sam worked steadily, his faded navy jacket flecked with sawdust, while Ellen shared fragments of her life. "My husband, Tom, loved this house," she said one morning, her voice soft as she polished a brass picture frame. "Said the sea kept him grounded after the war." Sam glanced at the frame, empty now, and nodded. Ocean's got a way of doing that. He didn't push, sensing the weight of her words. Ellen's beige cardigan hung loose on her frail shoulders, but her eyes held a fire that reminded Sam of his own resolve. Their conversations were sparse but deep, like the tide pooling in hidden coves. She spoke of Tom's love for fixing things, how he'd taught her to change a tire before they married. Sam shared stories of his Navy days, careful to skip the darker moments. Ellen listened, her hands folded, the faded photograph always in her pocket. Sam never asked about it, but he noticed how her fingers traced its edges when she thought he wasn't looking. Trust grew in these quiet exchanges, a bond forged without fanfare. Sam felt a purpose he hadn't known since Clara's passing, a reason to keep showing up. Port Haven, however, was watching. At the diner, Joe the fisherman tipped his cap when Sam passed. "Helping old Ellen, eh? Good on ya," he said, his voice carrying over the clink of coffee mugs. Mrs. Delaney, the baker, slipped Sam an extra scone, her floury hands patting his arm. "You're a blessing to that woman," she said, eyes warm. But not everyone saw it that way. Carl at the hardware store rolled his eyes when Sam bought screws. "What's he after? Fixing up Ellen's place? She got money stashed away or something?" He sneered, loud enough for others to hear. A few customers chuckled, but others shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Sam's gaze. At the post office, 2 women whispered as Sam mailed a bill. "He's spending too much time with her," one said, her voice sharp. "Widow like that, all alone? Looks suspicious?" Sam's jaw tightened, but he kept walking, the sting of their words familiar. He'd felt this isolation before, when the VA denied his claim, when neighbors questioned why a healthy veteran needed help. The system had betrayed him, and now the town's skepticism felt like another knife. Still, Ellen's gratitude kept him grounded. One afternoon, as he repaired her kitchen faucet, she set a chipped mug of tea beside him. "You don't have to keep coming, you know," she said, her tone gentle but probing. "This old place is more trouble than it's worth." Sam wiped his hands on a rag, meeting her eyes. "Trouble's no bother when it's for someone who deserves it." Ellen's lips curved, a rare full smile. "You're stubborn, aren't you?" "Guilty," Sam said, chuckling. The moment felt like a gift, a reminder that kindness could bridge even the deepest loneliness. But trouble was brewing. The next week, Sam arrived to find a letter taped to Ellen's gate. Its stark white envelope stood out against the weathered wood, the town council's seal glaring in red ink. Ellen stood at her door, her cardigan clutched tight, her face pale. "They're raising my property taxes," she said, her voice trembling. "Said the house has improved because of the repairs. I can't afford it, Sam." Sam's stomach dropped. His work, his help, had triggered this. He took the letter, scanning the cold official words. The council claimed the fixes increased the property value, justifying a tax hike Ellen couldn't pay on her widow's pension. "This is nonsense," Sam said, his voice low but firm. "They can't punish you for a few repairs." Ellen shook her head, her eyes distant. "It's always something. After Tom died, the VA fought me for years over his benefits. Now this." Sam's fists clenched, the paper crinkling in his grip. He knew that fight. Bureaucracy's cold indifference, the way it wore you down. "I'll talk to them," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Get this sorted." Ellen touched his arm, her hand light but steady. "You've done enough, Sam. Don't make trouble for yourself." But Sam was already decided. The next day, he marched into the town hall, the letter in hand. The clerk, a young man with slicked back hair, barely looked up from his computer. "Repairs increase value. That's policy," he said, his voice flat. "Pay or appeal. Takes 6 months." Sam leaned forward, his weathered hands gripping the counter. "This is a widow's home. She's on a fixed income. You're telling me you'll tax her out of her house for a fixed mailbox?" The clerk shrugged. "Rules are rules." Sam's blood boiled, but he kept his voice steady. "Then I want to see Councilman Reed." The clerk smirked. "Reed's busy. Come back next week." Sam didn't budge. "I'm a veteran. She's a veteran's widow. We deserve better than this." The clerk's smirk faded, but he pointed to the door. "Next week." Outside, the overcast sky mirrored Sam's mood. He stood on the steps, the seas hummed faint in the distance. The council's dismissal felt like another betrayal. A system rigged against those who'd given everything. He thought of Ellen, her trembling hands, her quiet dignity. He'd promised to help, and he wouldn't back down. Word of Sam's stand spread faster than the coastal fog. At the diner, Joe clapped him on the shoulder. "You're fighting the good fight, Sam. Council's been fleecing folks for years." Mrs. Delaney sent him home with a loaf of bread, her eyes fierce. "Don't let those suits push you around." But the whispers grew darker. Carl at the hardware store was louder now, his voice carrying over the jingle of the bell. "Sam's stirring trouble, mark my words. Gonna get Ellen's house taken with his meddling." At the grocery store, a group of retirees muttered as Sam passed. "He's making things worse," one said. "Should have left well enough alone." Even Joe's son, Mark, a mechanic in his 30s, pulled Sam aside one evening. "Look, I respect what you're doing, Mark said, his tone hesitant. But the council's got power. You're poking a bear, and Ellen's the one who'll pay. Sam's chest tightened. Mark had been like a son to him, helping with odd jobs after Clara died. His doubt stung worse than the stranger's gossip. You think I should walk away? Sam asked, his voice low. Mark shifted, uneasy. I'm saying be careful. You're not in the Navy anymore. That night, Sam sat on his porch, the creak of his chair loud in the stillness. The VA letter still lay on his table, a symbol of a system that had failed him. Now the town, his home, was turning too. He thought of Ellen's smile, her tea, her quiet strength. Was he helping, or was he dragging her into a fight she couldn't win? The fog rolled in, thick and heavy, swallowing the stars. Sam's hands gripped the chair's arms, his knuckles white. He'd faced storms at sea, gunfire in distant lands. But this, fighting a town, a system, a tide of doubt, this was harder. He closed his eyes, Clara's voice echoing in his mind. Do what's right, Sam, even when it hurts. He opened his eyes, resolve hardening. He'd see this through. For Ellen. For himself. But the conflict was only beginning. The council sent another letter, this time threatening a lien on Ellen's house if the taxes weren't paid in 30 days. Sam showed up at her cottage, the paper crumpled in his hand. Ellen stood at her gate, her cardigan buttoned against the chill, her face weary but unbroken. They won't stop, will they? She said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam shook his head, his jaw tight. Not if we let them. He expected her to protest, to tell him to let it go. But Ellen's eyes met his, fierce and clear. Then we don't let them. Sam nodded, a spark of pride flaring in his chest. They were in this together now. Two veterans against a system that had forgotten them. But Port Haven wasn't done testing them. The whispers grew louder, the stares colder. And Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The fog clung to Port Haven like a shroud, muting the ocean's roar as Sam stood on Ellen's porch, his hands clenched around a mug of cold tea. The council's latest letter, threatening a lien on her cottage, burned in his pocket. Ellen sat in her wicker chair, her beige cardigan draped over her shoulders, her silver hair glowing faintly in the dim morning light. Her fingers traced the edges of the faded photograph in her pocket, a ritual Sam had come to recognize. We're not giving up, he said, his voice rough but steady. Ellen's eyes, sharp despite her 80 years, met his. I know, Sam, but this fight, it's wearing me down. Her admission hit him like a punch. He'd promised to protect her, to fix this. But the system's weight was crushing them both. His own battles, Clara's death, the VA's betrayal, felt small compared to Ellen's quiet endurance. Yet here she was admitting vulnerability. And it shook him. He set the mug down, the porcelain clinking against the weathered wood. I'll find a way, he said, more to himself than her. But doubt gnawed at him, sharp and relentless. What if his stubbornness was costing Ellen her home? What if his kindness had only brought her pain? The town's judgment didn't help. At the diner, Sam overheard whispers over the clatter of plates. He's gonna lose that old lady her house, a woman muttered, her voice dripping with pity. Joe, the fisherman, tried to defend him, but his words were drowned out by skeptical grumbles. Sam's heart's in the right place, but he's out of his depth, another man said, shaking his head. Sam kept his eyes on his coffee, the steam curling like the fog outside. He'd faced enemy fire, repaired engines under pressure, but this, being questioned by his own town, cut deeper. Even Mrs. Delaney's kindness felt strained. She handed him a bag of rolls, her smile tight. You're doing right by Ellen, she said, but her eyes flicked to the other customers as if gauging their reactions. Sam nodded, the weight of their doubt settling in his chest. He thought of Clara, how she'd always believed in him, even when he doubted himself. But Clara was gone, and now Ellen was slipping under the same bureaucratic tide that had nearly drowned him. The breaking point came on a grey afternoon, the sky heavy with unshed rain. Sam arrived at Ellen's cottage, toolbox in hand, ready to fix a loose shutter. But the gate was locked, the porch empty. No tea, no cookies, no Ellen. The cottage windows were dark, the curtains drawn tight. Sam's heart thudded, a cold dread creeping up his spine. Ellen, he called, his voice swallowed by the wind. No answer. He knocked, the sound echoing against the weathered wood. Nothing. He checked the mailbox, the gate, even peered through a crack in the curtains. The house felt abandoned, like it was holding its breath. Panic clawed at him. Had she fallen, left town? Worse, he thought of her trembling hands, her quiet strength, and the photograph she guarded so fiercely. What if he'd failed her when she needed him most? Sam sprinted to the diner, his boots pounding the pavement. Joe looked up from his coffee, his weathered face creasing with concern. Seen Ellen today? Sam asked, breathless. Joe shook his head. Not since yesterday. She was at the market, looked tired. Sam's stomach twisted. He checked the bakery, the post office, even the pier where Ellen sometimes sat. No sign of her. The town seemed to close ranks, its streets emptier than usual, the fog thicker. He returned to a cottage, his hands shaking as he jimmied the gate open. The porch creaked under his weight, the silence deafening. Ellen, it's Sam! He shouted, pounding the door. Still nothing. He sank onto the porch steps, his head in his hands. The toolbox sat beside him, useless now. He'd fixed her mailbox, her gate, her faucet, but he couldn't fix this. His kindness, his stubborn stand, had led to this moment, and it felt like betrayal. Not just of Ellen, but of himself, of everything he'd fought for. His eyes burned, his throat tight. Damn it, he whispered, his voice breaking. The town's judgment roared back to life. By evening, the whispers had turned vicious. At the hardware store, Carl leaned over the counter, his voice loud enough for all to hear. Sam's gone and scared Ellen off, probably pushed her too far with his hero act. A customer nodded, her lips pursed. Poor woman, should have left her alone. At the grocery store, Mark, Joe's son, avoided Sam's eyes as he rang up a customer. When Sam approached, Mark muttered, Heard Ellen's gone. You sure you were helping her? Sam froze, the words a knife in his gut. Mark had been family, someone he'd trusted. Now even he doubted. You think I'd hurt her? Sam asked, his voice low, dangerous. Mark flinched but didn't back down. I'm saying you stirred things up. Maybe she couldn't handle it. Sam walked out, the bell jangling behind him. The fog pressed closer, the seas hum a distant roar. He felt like he was back in the Navy, alone on a ship in a storm with no land in sight. The council's letters, the town's gossip, Mark's betrayal, it all piled on, threatening to break him. He wandered to the pier, the same place he'd first seen Ellen with her photograph. The wood was slick with mist, the air thick with salt. He gripped the railing, his knuckles white, and stared into the grey void. Was this what it came to? Helping someone, only to lose them? Fighting a system, only to be crushed? He thought of Clara, her voice soft but fierce. Keep going, Sam, even when it's hard. But this was more than hard. This was losing everything. His purpose, his friend, his place in this town. He reached into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing an old dog tag, the metal worn smooth from years of handling. It was his, from his first deployment, a reminder of who he'd been, a man who didn't quit, who stood firm under fire. He closed his fist around it, the edges biting into his palm. Ellen had trusted him. She'd called him stubborn, smiled at his small acts of kindness. He couldn't give up now. Not when she was out there, somewhere, needing him. He straightened, the fog swirling around him. I'm not done, he said to the sea, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. He'd find Ellen. He'd face the council, the town, the whole damn system if he had to. But the town wasn't finished with him yet. The next morning, a flyer appeared on the bulletin board outside the diner. Bold red letters screamed, Save our town from troublemakers. Below, in smaller print, it accused certain individuals of disrupting Port Haven's peace, driving away vulnerable residents. No names, but everyone knew who it meant. Sam stood before it, his breath shallow as passers-by whispered, He's gone too far, a woman said, her voice sharp. Ellen's gone because of him, another added, her tone heavy with blame. Even Joe, usually a steadfast ally, looked uneasy. Folks are riled up, Sam, he said quietly. Maybe lay low for a bit. Sam's hands balled into fists, the dog tag still in his pocket. Lay low? After everything? Ellen's trust, his promise, his fight? No. He tore the flyer down, the paper ripping in his hands. I'm not the one who should be hiding, he said, his voice carrying over the murmurs. The crowd fell silent, some averting their eyes, others glaring. Sam didn't care. He'd faced worse than gossip, worse than betrayal. But as he walked away, the weight of Ellen's absence pressed harder. Where was she? And how much more could he lose before this fight was over? The fog thickened, the town's judgment a storm on the horizon. Sam's resolve held, but it was fraying, thread by thread. He didn't know it yet, but the truth was closer than he thought, and it would change everything. The fog lifted over Port Haven, sunlight glinting off the sea as Sam stood at the pier, his navy jacket damp from mist. Ellen's absence gnawed at him, the town's accusations a heavy weight. He clutched his old dog tag, its edges worn smooth, and whispered, "I'm not giving up." That afternoon, a stranger appeared at the diner. A tall man in his 60s, wearing a crisp navy blazer, his face lined with purpose. Joe nudged Sam, nodding toward the man. "Says he's looking for you." Sam approached, wary. The man extended a hand. "Captain Daniel Hayes, retired? You're Sam, the one helping Ellen?" Sam nodded, his throat tight. "She's gone. I don't know where." Hayes' eyes softened. "She's not gone. She's at the VA hospital in Brunswick. Asked me to find you." Sam's heart lurched. "Hospital?" Hayes held up a hand. "She's okay, just a checkup. But she told me everything. Your fight with the council, the taxes. You stood by her when no one else did." Sam's knees weakened. Ellen was alive. Safe. But why hadn't she told him? Hayes pulled a letter from his pocket, the paper crisp with official VA letterhead. "Ellen's husband, Tom, was my CO in Vietnam. Saved my life. She's been fighting for his benefits ever since. Same as you with the VA. You gave her hope, Sam." The words hit like a wave. Ellen wasn't just a widow. She was a warrior like him. Hayes continued. "She didn't tell you she was leaving because she didn't want you blamed if the council won. But she's ready to fight now, with you." Sam's eyes burned. He doubted himself, but Ellen hadn't. At the hospital, Ellen sat in a small room, her beige cardigan neat, her silver hair catching the light. She held the faded photograph, Tom in his navy uniform, smiling. "Sam," she said, her voice warm, "you didn't let me fall." She handed him the photo, her hand steady. "Tom always said one person standing up is enough. You proved it." Sam swallowed hard, his voice rough. "You're the strong one, Ellen." She smiled fierce. "We both are." Hayes had news. The VA, alerted by his connections, was reviewing Ellen's case. The council, shamed by the story's spread, withdrew the tax hike. At the town hall, Councilman Reed faced a crowd, his face red as he mumbled an apology. Carl, the hardware store skeptic, stood silent, his smirk gone. Mark, Joe's son, approached Sam later, eyes down. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." Sam clapped his shoulder. "We're good." Port Haven changed. The diner started a veterans' coffee hour, Joe's idea, where old sailors shared stories. Mrs. Delaney baked for VA hospital visits. Her scones a hit. Even Carl volunteered to fix wheelchairs, muttering, "Guess I misjudged." Sam and Ellen led the charge, starting a fund to help veterans with taxes, their bond a beacon. Ellen's cottage became a hub, her porch swing creaking under new friends. Sam found peace, his toolbox still busy, but his heart fuller. He wasn't alone anymore. One evening, Ellen gave him a small plaque, engraved with Tom's words, "One person standing is enough." Sam hung it above his door, a reminder of their victory. The town's wounds healed, its people learning that kindness could shift tides. Sam's stand had sparked a legacy, proving small acts could topple giants. On a clear night, Sam sat on his porch, the seas hummed soft. His navy jacket hung on the chair, the dog tag in his pocket. He thought of Clara, Ellen, Tom, lives woven by duty and courage. Port Haven's lights glowed, a constellation of changed hearts. He smiled, the spark in his eyes brighter now. Type STAND. If you believe one person's courage can change everything. Share in the comments who's stood by you. Hit that like, subscribe, and ring the bell. These stories keep us human.